האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening. Dobro V'yetcher. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Ki Tavo. We're going to do a very small section. We Baruch Hashem have done almost all the other sections on this Parsha. We're going to do Os Yud, section number 10. A Yud is a small letter, and this is a small section. Before we begin, we're going to take a look at a couple of psukim from our Parsha. We'll start with Perek Chav Ches Pasuk Aleph, again Parsha Ki Tavo. The pasuk says, "V'hoya im shamoa tishma," and if you will surely listen, b'kol Hashem Elokecha, to the voice of Hashem your God, lishmor la'asos es kol mitzvosav, to observe and to do all of his mitzvos, all of his commandments, asher anochi mitzavcha hayom, that I command you today. Unesancha Hashem Elokecha, and Hashem your God will place you elyon, supreme, al kol goyei haaretz, above all the nations of the earth. That's the first pasuk in Chav Ches, Perek Chav Ches. When we move much later in Perek Chav Ches, and we begin to read the Tochacha, the part of this week's parsha, which deals with the terrible, catastrophic predictions of what could happen to the Jewish people if they depart from observing God's Torah. Then we read at the end, towards the end, Perek Chav Ches Pasuk Sameches, V'heshivcha Hashem Mitzrayim ba'oniyos, and Hashem will return you to Egypt in ships, Baderech asher amarti lecha, in the way that I told you, lo sosif od lir osa, you will not continue to see Mitzrayim, v'his makartem sham la'oivecha, and you will be sold there to your enemies, la'avodim v'lishvachos, to be slaves and to be made servants, ve'ein koneh, and there will be no one to purchase you, meaning so many people, God forbid, so many Jews will be being sold as slaves that there will be many who just won't have purchasers. The market will be flooded and overwhelmed with chas v'shalom, with Jewish people being sold as slaves. So clearly what we see is that what's being told to us is that the Jewish people can observe the Torah and observe the mitzvos, and Hashem will bring them to the very top of the world. And on the other hand, if God forbid we depart from observing the Torah, we can be brought down to the lowest levels. And we'll see that the Zera Shimshon is going to discuss that exact cycle. Ki Tavo Os Yud, B'Mesorah. In the Mesorah, we'll talk about what that means in a moment. In the Mesorah, there's a note that says, V'Rachel Chamisha. The word V'Rachel and Rachel appears 5 times in the Torah. V'Simon, and the marker for the 5 times, meaning here are the words that show us the 5 times that the word V'Rachel appears. The first one is V'Rachel ba'a im hatzon. This is from back in Sefer Bereshis, Parshas Vayetze. V'Rachel ba'a im hatzon. And Rachel was coming with the flock. This is going back to when Yaakov Avinu left Eretz Canaan and went to on a journey to the house of Lavan. And before he got to the house of Lavan, he stopped to talk to some shepherds, and he saw Rachel coming with the flock, with the sheep of her father. So that's the first time we see the word V'Rachel. The second time is also in that parsha, V'Rachel hayasa yefas toar, and Rachel was looked beautiful. Rachel was it says Yifas Toar Vifas Mareh. She had a beautiful form and a beautiful appearance. The third time is Vayiftach Es Rachma V'Rachel Akara, Hashem opened Leah, Rachel's sister Leah. Hashem opened her womb, meaning she was able to have children. Rachel akara, and Rachel was barren until Rachel later on gave birth to Yosef, and then later Binyamin. She didn't have children, but Leah had children right away. V'Rachel lakcha es hatrafim. The fourth use of the word V'Rachel still in Parshas Vayetze, and Rachel took the idols that belonged to her father. And then, at the fifth and final time that the word V'Rachel is used in the Torah, it says, V'achar nigash Yosef v'Rachel vayishtachavu. This is a little later in the narrative. This is actually Parshas Vayishlach. And when Yaakov and his family and all who are with him meet up and encounter Esav, it says that Yosef and Rachel came, vayishtachavu, and they bowed down to Esav. So these are the 5 times. Now let's go back to the word b'mesorah. The word mesorah means tradition, chain of tradition. And the Baalei HaMesorah were people who were very involved in passing down accurate versions of Tanakh, originally of the Torah texts, and then later on of Nevi'im and Ksuvim, but they were experts and basically devoted their lives to making sure that what was passed down from one generation to the next was accurate in terms of the text of the Torah and the vowels and the pronunciations and everything that's needed to read the Torah correctly. In addition, at a certain point, they added notes, Masoretic notes, which appeared on the sides of the text, and very early copies. They added notes that said things like this note, how many times certain words appeared in the Torah or in the Tanakh, and where was the first one, and other types of notes. And these notes were called the Masoretic notes. So that's what the Zera Shimshon is referring to when he says b'mesorah, in the Mesorah, in the Masoretic notes. It states that the word V'Rachel appears 5 times, and the Zera Shimshon is giving us the 5 times that the word V'Rachel appears. Now let's continue. Yirmos lema she'era l'chneses Yisrael. These 5 psukim about Rachel hint to us, they allude to us, events that happened to the entire Jewish people. Shenikres Rachel, who are called Rachel. The Jewish people are referred to as Rachel. Uchemad at Omar, and this is seen, stated in a pasuk in Yirmiyah, Rachel mivaka al boneha. Rachel was crying over her sons. Very often when people quote that pasuk or read that pasuk, they read Rachel, they understand Rachel to mean Rachel Imenu. The neshama of Rachel Imenu was crying when the Jewish people went into exile. But here the Zera Shimshon is teaching us, and this we see this in the Targum also on this pasuk, that Rachel is actually referring to the Jewish people. The Jewish people were crying over their sons going into exile. Mitachila ve'ad sof. The 5 psukim that have to do with Rachel and have the word V'Rachel in them tell us the story of events that actually happened. They foretold events that actually happened to the Jewish people from the beginning to the end, meaning from the first pasuk to the last pasuk. Each one of them refers to events that ended up happening to the Jewish people, and the Zera Shimshon is now going to go through those events. Next paragraph. Sheka'asher nichnasu la'aretz, when the Jewish people entered into Eretz Yisrael, v'Rachel ba'a im hatzon. That was alluded to in the very first pasuk that used the word v'Rachel, and Rachel came with the flock. That was a reference to the Jewish people coming in and entering the land of Israel. She came to the land with the flock that belonged to her father, meaning the Jewish people. We are the flock that belongs to Hashem. Kemoshe Ne'amar, as a pasuk in Yechezkel says, next page on the right, Ve'aten tzoni, and you are my flock, you are my sheep. Tzon mar isi, you are the flock that I am shepherding. Adam atem, you are man, and then the pasuk continues, and I am Hashem. So we see Bnei Yisrael is referred to, of course, not just in this pasuk, but in other places, as the flock, the sheep of Hashem. And so when it says Rachel came with her father's sheep, that alludes to the Jewish people entering the land of Eretz Yisrael, the Jewish people being the flock of Hashem. Ki ro'ahi, because she was a shepherdess, which is from that pasuk. Klomar, this means to say, Hayusoroa osanu b'meitav haaretz. She had us graze in the best part of the land. Metaphorically speaking, Rachel brought us into the land. We came into the land, the Jewish people came into the land of Israel. And not only did they come into the land of Israel, but they were treated like Hashem's flock, and they were allowed to graze and brought to graze in the best and to settle in the best parts of the land. Ve'oz shema noda b'sha'arim, and then her reputation became known throughout the gates. It spread. The reputation of the Jewish people, represented by Rachel, their reputation spread in the world. Vayahalaluha vayishabchuha, and the world praised and glorified the Jewish people. Shebonu es hamikdash. Not only did they come into Eretz Yisrael, but ultimately they built the Beis HaMikdash. That, of course, is in the time of Shlomo Melech, building the first Beis HaMikdash. V'hoya Hashem imam, and Hashem was with them. L'shem u'lesiferes v'lisehila, for a name, a good reputation, and for glory and for praise. In other words, it was a time of gold, a golden period, a golden era. V'zehu, and this is referred to by the second use of the word v'rachel. V'rachel hayusa yifas toar v'ifas mara. And Rachel was of good form and beautiful appearance. Yifas toar, good, beautiful form, lehakodesh baruch hu, to Hashem. V'ifas mara, and a beautiful appearance, le'umos ha'olam, to the nations of the world. So this was truly a golden era in the sense that after the Jewish people settled the land of Eretz Yisrael, and they ultimately built the Beis HaMikdash in the time of Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, they had reached a point in which they were appreciated, they were praised by Hashem for their spiritual growth and commitment, and they were praised by the Umos HaOlam for all of the great things that they had accomplished and developed in the land of Israel. And that's alluded to in the second pasuk. Next paragraph. Umeh also lo HaKodesh Baruch Hu. What did Hashem do after that? Vayiftach es rachmo ve'Rachel akora. And Hashem opened Leah's womb, but Rachel was barren. Now, that doesn't sound like a good thing, but the Zera Shimshon is going to explain it in a positive way. This is aligned with what it states in the Gemara in Maseches Brachos. Rani akora lo yolada. The Gemara in Brachos quotes the pasuk from Yeshaya, "Rejoice, barren woman who has not given birth." And the Gemara asks, Mishum de lo yolada rani? Because a barren woman hasn't given birth, should she rejoice? Does that make sense? Ella, but Rani, she should rejoice. Shelo yolda banim legehenim, because she hasn't given birth to sons that will go to Gehenna, sons who will pursue terrible types of pursuits in life and end up being punished for it. That's what it means that the barren woman should rejoice. Not, in other words, not a barren woman who has no children, but a barren woman who doesn't have children, who are leading bad lifestyles and sinful lives and are doomed to Gehenna. The Afkan, and so to here, that's what's being referred to by this bringing of the pasuk. Omar Akosov, the pasuk is saying, "Sheposach rechem hanochris laholid banim legehenim," that the nations of the world are giving birth to children who are doing bad, terrible things, and will be Yordei Gehenim, will go down to Gehenim. V'Rachel Akara, and Rachel is barren in the sense, milaholid banim kaelu, that she was barren from giving birth to children like these, like Gehenim, who are doing such terrible things. So the Zera Shimshon says that after the Jewish people rose up to the great heights in the golden era of building the Beis Hamikdash, Hashem blessed them that to be different, to be distinguished from the nations of the world and the idol worshippers of the world, who were giving birth to children and multiplying, but whose children didn't have spiritual value and pursued sinful lives. But Rachel, meaning the Jewish people, was barren of those types of children. Rachel, the Jewish people, was bringing righteous children into the world. Next paragraph. Omnam, however, keshechotu Yisrael v'avdu avodah zara. However, when the Jewish people did become involved in idolatry, dahainu v'Rachel lokcha es hatrofim. This is symbolized by the fourth pasuk about Rachel taking the idols of her father Lavan. Oz nishtabdu begolos. Then they became in servitude, in exile, v'hoyu avodim, and they became slaves. Moshe Kosuv, as the pasuk says that we read before beginning the piece, v'hismakartem sham le'oivecha, and you will be sold there to your enemies, la'avodim v'lishvachos, as slaves and maidservants. V'zehu, and this is alluded to in the fifth pasuk with the word v'rachel, v'achar nigash Yosef and Rachel v'yishtachavu, and afterwards, Yosef and Rachel approached Esav and they bowed down. When it says, and they bowed down to Esav, that alludes to the fact that the Jewish people in the future would be punished with exile and servitude because of the fact that they had stumbled so grievously and began to worship idols. So the Zera Shimshon has shown us that the 5 psukim that have the word V'Rachel in them all connect and all foretold future events that would happen to the Jewish people, with Rachel being a name that symbolizes Knesset Yisrael, as the Zera Shimshon said, the entire Jewish people. So we never want to end off on a negative note. Be'ezus Hashem, any kind of suffering or punishments or sinful things that the Jewish people experienced in the past and perhaps that continue to be part of the Jewish experience today, may Hashem completely cleanse us of those things immediately, and also, of course, during the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur period, so that we can no longer need to be concerned about those types of negative experiences and negative things. Yasher Koach for joining in the learning of the Zera Shimshon on this week's Parsha. Be'ezus Hashem, God willing, we look forward to learning again in the Zera Shimshon together on next week's Parsha.